Thank you very much for joining us. I want to start on what exactly the security force is and what countries could potentially be a part of it and who wouldn't be a part of it.
Sure. So, as part of the Trump-led, the White House, Trump administration peace plan, the 20-point plan that brought about the ceasefire in Gaza, the second phase of the plan, which we have not yet entered, involves very explicitly the disarmament of Hamas, the removal of Hamas from power. There's supposed to be an understanding that Hamas leaders or fighters that agree to disarm will receive some sort of amnesty, and an international security force, a multinational security force backed by the United States and Western nations, but actually implemented on the ground by a coalition of Arab and Muslim nation soldiers to oversee, first and foremost, the demilitarization of Hamas and of the Gaza Strip so that Israel can get out, so that Israel doesn't have to go back in at this point because Israel already withdrew from key areas, and to ensure that Hamas does not rearm, does not retake power, and so that Israel does not have to then go back in, and so that hostilities do not resume between the two sides.
And one of the specifics in the draft that was reported on is that this is a security force and not a peacekeeping force. Can you walk us through the distinction there and why it matters?
Correct. So a security force has a much more robust mandate. Israel in general, this part of the region in general, has a pretty bad experience with UN peacekeeping forces. We know, of course, since the decision in Lebanon following the 2006 war that these so-called peacekeeping forces have sat by and literally watched Hezbollah creep up to the border, completely rebuild its infrastructure, and have a massive tunnel infrastructure and rocket infrastructure. Hezbollah fired missiles at Israel for a solid 8 months before Israel finally decided to put an end to that. They were planning an October 7th style attack of their own on a much larger scale. And so there's a bad experience with the impotency of such peacekeeping forces. What you have here are voluntary commitments by Muslim countries. We're talking, of course, about Egypt. We're talking about Jordan. We're talking about countries like Azerbaijan and Indonesia. And these countries have significant experience in fighting Islamist radical militant groups, possibly would be backed, whether through troops or certainly through finance and intelligence, by countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And then on the ground, specifically on the front lines of this, is supposed to be a Palestinian security force that is not Hamas, that would then supposedly counter the Hamas forces. And so that's the difference between a security force versus a UN peacekeeping force, is the robustness, the commitment to actually engage and not just keep the two sides apart like a referee in some match, but to actually take an active role in implementing the plan, which has to be the disarmament of Hamas and the demilitarization of Gaza.
And there was some confusion or debate over whether or not Turkey was going to be involved in that force. Can you walk us through what we know about if Turkey will be involved or not?
Sure. So the Turks, of course, are one of the most competent and robust militaries in the region, certainly a large military. And they have been one of the key patrons, one of the key backers of Hamas over recent years, hosting Hamas officials and giving certainly a lot of rhetorical support to Hamas, and being one of the key rhetorical foes, let's say, of Israel in recent years. However, under American pressure, and because the Turks, at the end of the day, also want access to advanced arms, F-35s, advanced weapon systems, the United States was able to pressure the Turks into playing a positive role, in bringing about a ceasefire and pressuring Hamas to accept, at least in name, accept that ceasefire. So the Turks have said that they are willing and interested in putting forth their own troops to help implement this ceasefire. The problem is that the Israeli government and the Israeli military doesn't trust the Turks. There has not been, we're talking about a country that 20 years ago, there was actually serious and significant and advanced military and intelligence and defense cooperation between Israel and Turkey. And that state of that closeness of the relationship has simply not existed since Erdogan has been in power and has ramped up the kind of pro-Islamist, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel rhetoric. And so Israel, it would be very hard for me to see Israel agreeing to the Turks having an active role on the ground and trusting them to actually try to disarm Hamas rather than serve as an impediment to the point of the entire ceasefire in the international security force.
And we know that the security force would be overseen or administered by the Board of Peace and that Donald Trump would be the chair of the Board of Peace. But do we have any more information about what this Board of Peace actually is?
Not a whole lot more information. So as part of the plan and as part of the run-up to the plan, President Trump said there would be, of course, as you said, this International Board of Peace, that he would be the head of it. And there have been a lot of talks that former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who does have a lot of experience in the region and is seen as more or less as certainly a competent but a trusted figure, and who's devoted much of his post-political career into trying to broker peace agreements and political agreements in the Middle East, might serve as kind of the executive or the day-to-day head of this. I haven't heard a whole lot more about this Board of Peace since then. It is probably, to my understanding, something that would oversee a technocratic, non-Hamas Palestinian governance, some kind of administration, and that is something that the Palestinians, of course, would have to agree to. They would be the ones implementing it, but overseen by this Board of Peace that would have U.S. backing. It's critical international backing, international oversight and guidance. And I think the key point that we have here that we have not had in the past is the positive involvement of virtually every country in the region who is backing this agreement, who is backing the international security force, who is backing the transitional government, and who is backing the call and the need to disarm Hamas and to remove it from political power in Gaza.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.